In terms of, this is a softball in each of your respective wheelhouses, but Eric, you get to go first. Why is the Battle of Franklin more important than the Battle of Gettysburg?
Oh, good God. I would say that it's almost impossible to compare the two because of the times they were fought. The midway point of the war and at the end. But I would say that Franklin actually achieved something that Gettysburg did not. It essentially crippled and virtually destroyed one of the two armies. Whereas after Gettysburg, Lee continues to fight for nearly 2 years and is still a very formidable force. And Hood, while greatly diminished, and the AOT greatly diminished when they came into Tennessee, it was a shell of itself after Franklin.
And Gary, why is he wrong?
Well, he didn't exactly say Franklin was more important than Gettysburg, and I'm not one of those Gettysburg people that actually goes out and says Gettysburg is the most important battle of the Civil War. I don't call it the turning point of the Civil War. I think Gettysburg is very important actually for what it prevented. And I'll note here that actually, that unlike Hood, Robert E. Lee went on to fight another day because he didn't say advance against a stronger army at Harrisburg after he lost at Gettysburg. I mean, that's a big difference in that Hood kept on advancing on toward Nashville at a great disadvantage, or what would ultimately become a great disadvantage against George Henry Thomas. I think Gettysburg is important mostly for what it prevented. It's hard to look at the strategic situation and think, oh, things are much different than they were a year earlier. And there are scholars out there that try to say Gettysburg isn't important because, the armies returned to where they had been a year earlier, basically, and they would continue on in that way. But I actually think that, had the Union Army not responded the way that it did, had that fighting not decimated the Confederate Army and really destroyed their ability to wage another battle in the North, that the consequences could have been great. So that's where I put Gettysburg as wildly important.
I'd add to that one of the similarities that I see between the two battles and really the two campaigns is both Lee and Hood are greatly extended for different reasons and obviously at different times of the war, but they're greatly extended deep in enemy territory. And I think that is why you end up seeing the great attacks of July 3rd, 1863 and November 30th of 1864, where both commanders feel that they have little other alternative. They can't simply turn around at that point. The difference with Hood advancing to Nashville is the enemy actually did retreat from Franklin, and at that stage, Lee is bottled up in Virginia, as we all know, in Petersburg, and Hood feels there is no way that you can simply retire, because then the war is over. So they're different situations, but I think there are similar trains of thought in the minds of both Confederate commanders as to being that deep in enemy territory, needing to continue until you cannot continue any longer.
Agreed.